Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Under the Skin segment. Unfortunately, we don't have like a fancy like, "Oh, welcome to Under the Skin" or anything like that.
Yeah,
We're working on that. But
we don't
tonight,
need
yeah,
that.
exactly. It is more organic this way. But
Yeah.
tonight we talk about the latest what is it? What is it? What is it? What is it? This is a okay. It is a five-piece EP. Jesus, that took me way longer than it
Yeah,
should have.
5-track EP.
Five track EP, and then with the release on Spotify, having five more tracks for live versions of all the songs on this little record.
Yeah.
Really love the album cover. I thought it was really interesting. Not sure who
Yeah,
the
that was from our
artist.
singer TJ. I feel like, yeah. He we had this completely different other cover in mind, but he sort of hated it, so he sort of went over our heads and got this piece commissioned, and it worked out really well, which yeah,
Did
you know.
did
This was I think Giannis, Remedy art
Giannis
design,
not
I'm pretty sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one who did it. And like he didn't I don't think we sent him much. We just sent him like the lyrics and just a quick brief from TJ, but like it went way above my expectations for like the
Mm.
turnaround, and I just love it.
No, it's
Yeah.
great. I
Good
love the
artwork.
I love the color palette on this album. Like
Yeah.
it's really cool, and I don't even know, like it kind of has a sci-fi aspect to it that reminds me of Prometheus or like even Alien. It's strange that way,
Yeah, yeah, I
but
Oh,
gotcha. I gotcha.
yeah.
it's sick. So as we kind of descend into the Under the Skin session, with Nish and David of Xenobiotic join us here tonight to talk about this EP, Absolute Destruction. And I have a front to back session, a listening session for this EP, and I've said before plenty of times during session that I absolutely love this record, and that when I this being my first impression with Xenobiotic, it reminded me a lot of Ingested, and that's a
I
band I've been
love
listening
Ingested.
to a lot recently. Well, that's good.
Absolutely
um,
love that.
it's great
So
band.
heavy.
It's so heavy. Yeah, absolutely. So, if anything, whoever wants to take the reins on this question, or being that we're in the xenobiotic section of the podcast, maybe you guys can come up with a collective answer. But what would you guys say would be the back of the book summary for the lyrical context or contents on this EP?
I think it was pretty much it comes down to like humanity's overproduction and consumption of whether it's things like natural resources, maybe it's for territory, all that sort of stuff. But also, I think it's also sort of a take on just like how cynical it all is, how pointless it is. We're going to wars, invading countries for oil and all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
Um, you know, pointless, bullshit, mainstream media propaganda to make you believe that was, this side is wrong and we're the right guys and all that sort of stuff. And it kind of snowballing into this hateful, violent, perpetual, you know, thing. And I feel like the EP sort of follows, it's only I'll just say this now. There's only two new actual songs. The first two were the most recently written songs for it, so they sort of
Oh,
encapsulate most of the message. Yeah,
Mm.
more on that as we discuss it. Those two
Well,
songs
like
almost more or
we
less
had two sort of
encapsulate.
songs that we kind of dug up from like from our, early days, more or less. They were more or less the best songs from before we were a serious band, if that makes sense. You
ah,
know? And then we sort of redid the lyrics to them sort of accordingly to sort of fit the themes of this EP, which yeah, go on. Sorry, David.
Yeah, just to say like humanity is
fucked.
if you were to extract what humanity there is out of human beings, it's this hateful venge filled ball that will just destroy everything it touches, kind of thing. I feel like the end of Wretched to me, it depicts just a ravaged wasteland planet because we've stripped of its resources. We can't live on it
Yeah,
anymore. We're
Mm.
destructive and we leave destruction in our wake, kind of thing. And I feel
right.
like that's sort of what Wretched sort of feels like, and then Autophagia is sort of like the mental aspect of that, as well. That's very very brief and like, you know, just
Yeah, absolutely. Nish,
Yeah.
do you have a different interpretation upon the back of the book summary that that
Honestly,
we're
that's
inquiring
more.
upon?
I mean, yeah, contempt for the human race is kind of, you know, more or less sums it up. But I mean, we sort of wrote this during COVID, and you know, oh my God, COVID sort of brought out a side of humanity that was
Yes.
absolutely disgusting to watch. And it
True
was so
colors.
hard not to. It was so hard not to. I don't know. I feel like humans are amazing, and they, you know, I don't know if I want to say that that's humanity's true colors because fuck, that's bleak. Yeah, but like, it's like, you know, it just brought out the worst in so many people, and it brought out the best in a lot of things as well. Like,
Yes.
you know, in Perth, we kind of had a huge sort of cooperative effort to, you know, keep numbers low as possible, and it sort
Yes.
of worked to an extent. But then the government sort of got a little bit too controlling with it, and I think that was another huge thing as well, because in response to government authoritarianism, we had a whole bunch of people going after people as
Mm,
opposed to government, you know, and
yeah,
that's something that happens. That's something that's been happening so much more frequently recently. It's just like we have all of these terrible decisions being made, and we have people attacking their freaking neighbors over it, as opposed to getting
yeah,
together with their neighbors and going and attacking the people who are fucking
yeah.
responsible, you
right.
know? And
Vote them out, you know, that sort of thing. Like, it's a
hey,
divide and conquer, you know, it's divide and
yeah,
conquer
exactly.
Divide and
strategy.
And
conquer,
it's
yeah.
not just that. It's not just that it's divide and conquer. That's what power is going to do to people, to
Mhm.
keep people under control. That's what power is going to do as a necessity. The thing is, people buy into it so freaking easily, and it drives me mad.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting a little bit, you know, I'm getting a little, I gotta chill
You
out.
do no, you do your thing, bro. You do your thing. I like this. You're like, the people have had enough. Like
Yeah, but I mean, also, it's just there's so much. You know, I think there's a lyric in Autophagia: mass-produced madness, force-fed to the masses. Right? You know, like it's just gone into overdrive in the past few years, and it's painful to watch because it's just, you know, yeah, and you know, there's very much like it's hard not to have contempt for a species that does this.
Yes.
And that was more or less kind of a big driving factor in a lot of the lyrics, is that like, you know, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you doing
Like,
this?
why?
Like, yeah.
Why?
And then there's all of this sort of weird. Like, I remember when the Ukrainian war was you know, when that was more or less when that started, everyone had this weird lust for, you know, the United States to go in and fuck everything up. Even I mean, you know, I can't really comment on that at this point in time, but at the
Right.
same time, like, you know, I hate it. I hate war. I hate, you know,
No one wins in war.
yeah. And oh man, the
Yeah.
panic buying. Fuck, Jesus Christ. So we saw
Yeah,
people like absolutely reduced to animals in this in the past 2 years. And I mean, you know, we're starting to get our shit together right now, which is good. But at the same time, like, you know,
yeah.
There's much more to be
oh
done.
God, so many people were vilified. Everything's just kind of split right in two. And now it's just
Yeah.
everyone's someone's enemy now.
Yeah.
There's no, like, even if you're just like, I don't care about any of this shit. What do you mean you don't care? What are you talking about? You know, etc. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, it's very like, you can't not have a side, and I
Can't
hate
avoid
that. We shouldn't be going to war with ourselves. We should be going to war
No.
with the people who action these terrible decisions, right?
Yes.
We should be focused on a common enemy, and we were for a very long time, and then that just stopped. And you know,
And therefore we
yeah.
have hate monolith.
Yeah,
So
you know, I mean, a lot of the music that kind of came from that. I mean, we had, I don't know, after Mordrak, like Mordrak took a huge emotional toll on me specifically. Like, I needed to go back to therapy and stuff, and like sort of kind of get reacquainted with myself, and like, you know, it's going sort of well, but at the same time, a huge sort of side effect was like massive writer's block. So a lot of the music was just kind of just pushing through that massive like sort of wall that was kind of stopping all these ideas from coming forward.
right.
And yeah, there was a lot of frustration in that, which is why the music is just so fucking angry. You know, like,
Rightfully so. I like it.
yeah. I mean, there was a lot of things making us angry. There was a lot of things sort of stifling our kind of, I guess you could say, natural expressive tendencies through music and stuff. Like, you know, because I mean, yeah, I mean, it was really unhealthy that I mean, I mean, I guess we've always had this, I've always had this really unhealthy mentality where it's sort of like I've got to, you know, I've got to write from trauma, this and that. And I'm
Oh,
still trying to sort of working out. It's not healthy at all. It
no.
leaves, it takes a toll, and I'm still kind of working out how to do it without sort of going back into those terrible places and writing from them.
Right.
But you know, I guess yeah, Hate Monolith was more or less like, I guess stylistically as well. We noticed that like Unique Leader had a pretty specific sound that we didn't really kind of get onto with Mordrake. I mean, you
Right.
know, we got, you know, I mean, people love the Mordrake sound, and that's fair. That's more or less like that level of experimentation and expression and emotion and atmosphere. That's more or less what this band is about. But this was sort of a weird break from that. We just wanted to just sort of smash some shit out because we were angry.
Yeah.
We had a lot to be angry about, you know. Like,
Fantastic.
yeah.
And
And at least it comes from an authentic place. At least you're not writing music just to be like edgy and culty or anything like that. You're like,
No.
no, dude, we're fucking pissed because like
Yeah.
all across the world things are going wrong. But like even in our own country, when at first it was going pretty well, now it's making a fucking 180. And like we're just over here like, well, what the hell, dude? Why are we backtracking on our shit?
Yeah.
So like I completely understand that. David, you
Mm.
were going to say something?
um, another sort of thing with Hey Monolith was it was also you know, the songs were there, and it kind of gave us something to sort of focus on during COVID, because Mordrake, unfortunately, we released it, and then about a month later, COVID happened. So it was just
Ah,
something to sort of see us through the middle of it last year. Oh, sorry, yeah, this year.
We're really pissed off
We
about that too. Yeah.
so we put it out there as a stopgap, you know, clear out the old catalog of songs, and refresh some of the old bangers, and you know, do something cool with it um, as well. So that's sort of the other purpose it served. It kept us in that sort of like workflow, you know, where we could have very easily not done anything, and it might have, you know, it might have actually sort of decayed our motivation even further. I think even though it was actually a bit stressful, because around the time, you know, people were leaving the band, and I've sort of taken over just sort of inner managerial stuff with the band. It was a bit tricky
yeah,
picking it up and then going, right, okay, I've got to get this stuff ready, give it to UL, they're going to release it. But having all of that, having a bit of a deadline there helped, you know,
it's
see us
like,
at the end of the
all right,
COVID time,
focus.
and just, yeah, focus, deadline. It helped me in that respect,
Yes,
setting my mind to it, and just having something to work on. So, you know, in terms of the music, you know, it was a response to what we're seeing at the time and in our own lives. I think it was enough to just sort of give us a bit of a push
push and
forward, and
shove.
so we
Yeah,
didn't completely stop moving, didn't completely come to a halt or anything.
right.
Even if you know, even if the process itself wasn't all that enjoyable at times, I think it did pay off ultimately in the end, because, you know, we went and toured with it, had a really good
Absolutely.
time. So, you
No,
know,
it's
looking back on it,
Yeah.
I think it was a worthwhile undertaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
good. So as we kind of we got the leatherback, right? We got the hard case for the book. So now we're opening it. We're opening up
Mm.
these 5 tracks of just absolute anger and just like, what the fuck? And just like chair tossing, like gamer rage moments, you know what I mean? Um we first start off with track 1, that being autophagia. And funny enough, Nish already ended up quoting some of the lyrics off of that first track. But obviously we'll be bouncing back and forth because there are only 5 tracks. Like I want to make sure we talk about these songs as much as possible, give them the love, the attention, tell the stories about these songs that need to be told. Um,
Yeah.
so with autophagia, I mean, we have the back of the book summary. We're just kind of like compressed anger and just like kind of retaliating verbally emotionally against what was going on at the time. But what
Yeah.
about Autophagia kickstarts this album? Oop, I think David disappeared. Oh, there you are.
Oh, there it is.
We
Taking
what
my
about
natural
Autophagia like really helps kickstart this EP, whether with lyrical contents or just overall feel? Because this is, after all, the intro for the EP.
I mean, we wanted to start out with something that was literally just, yeah, this is not, your usual Xeno record with the big, ambient intro. And, we just wanted to just kind of go, bam, that sort of thing. Like, just, yeah, kind of going from 0 to 10 pretty much right in the first 2 seconds. And yeah, it's very, like, that's more or less what we wanted to do musically. In terms of the actual lyrical content, I mean, the autophagia basically means you're eating yourself,
Right.
And I mean, we had this huge video clip concept that couldn't work out because we had a whole bunch of people quit. Like we had basically, we were down a few members and we couldn't actually justify the cost of it all because it was going to cost something like $4 or $5 grand between the three of us. That wasn't really possible with sort of our responsibilities at the time. And yeah, so with regards to that, like it was more or less kind of driven by looking at people and the animosity that they had towards each other over nothing, like people were eating each other. That's what it was. Like it was hell. And yeah, like, yeah, I think there's another line in the song that says, I don't want to be remembered as a part of this fucking mess. And there's like a whole, it's not just that we're destroying each other. It's that we kind of destroy everything around us as a means of,
Coping.
that's just what we do.
Yeah.
Like not even coping, literally just existing. It's just like, everything drives every part of it, like the natural sort of human sort of Western capitalist lifestyle kind of well, I don't know if it's a capitalist thing or if it's just like a weird sort of, I don't know. It's like every part of our life just sort of destroy. It's like our ethics are being destroyed, our morality is being destroyed, our morality is being sort of torn apart. Our hang on, I got to think about this. Like everything we do, whether or not it's the cars we drive, the electricity that we use, something is being destroyed for that. And it's
Yes.
it was very much, and just not just that, there were people, there was like a whole series of wars that happened. And I mean, I don't know why it was. I get that there are people who profit from that war. I get it, but I hate it.
I'm with you on that, man. I promise.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's just like autophagia, at least like personally kind of came from a point of massive hate, massive hatred just for the way that our species was going. And that's a general sort of theme throughout the record, more or less. I should probably mention most of these lyrics were written by TJ, who is currently down a hole for work.
Oh.
Yeah, he's a miner.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So you
works
mean
on the mines as a
literally?
driller, sorry. Huh?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I
didn't realize you were saying like you were meaning literally. I thought you were meaning like he was like depressed or something. I'm like, oh
no.
shit.
He's literally, he's up north down a hole doing some drilling and making bank. So yeah.
There you go. No, that's cool. Great way to kickstart the EP then. Absolutely. Because like autophagia, like, yes, I can absolutely confirm for you, Nish, that when it comes to like capitalist mindset, like Western mindset here in the US, as well as like other major countries around the world that like praise democracy and praise capitalism and all of it's just even all of it's just rusty just gears in the machine that is capitalism. Like there is not one fucking second that you are not trying to profit off of something, and it's toxic as fuck. It ruins absolutely everything. I should know. I'm a YouTuber trying to make money off of and just like checking out songs, reacting to music. And, like obviously the podcast is more authentic because I'm like telling people stories and shit. But otherwise, like the fucking my YouTube channel, like that's a means of like getting connected with these bands, but also just like, hey, I'm checking out your music. Do you want we should hang out on my podcast sometime. I know you'll like it. You know, come over here. Like, and that's basically what I do right now. Obviously, I have blind as well, but otherwise, what I'm trying to entail is that yes, capitalism, and the capitalist mindset is so fucking toxic, but it's the only relevant system that I am able to operate in currently without going
Yeah.
completely redneck, hillbilly, go off grid, and just
Yeah.
like fuck
But
government,
even if
that type of shit.
even if you do that, then the feds just show up and try to go off grid. They're like, "Oh, you not connect to power grid? You trying to grow your own food and make like filter
Yeah.
your own water?"
It's
It's a
really
fucking
like
nightmare.
it's
But that
yeah,
will
it's
happen.
getting more and more and more tyrannous. It's sort of becoming, you know, I mean, like in Australia, we've got it reasonably good compared to the United States. I like to think, but like, yeah, the tyranny's kind of been sort of dialed up very, very, very slowly. And with regards to capitalism in general, I feel like it's not so much the system; it's the lack of ethics imposed on the system. It's the fact that
Agreed.
pretty much people can basically run away with, everything if they wanted to,
Too many
and
loopholes.
there's no sort of regulation on how. Yeah, too many loopholes, exactly. But it's
But
also like,
like,
the system is sort of rigged to benefit a lot of people at the top, sort of. Yeah, as opposed to if we could kind of like, yeah, it's a bugged system that needs some fixes,
Yeah.
you
the
know
thing is, it's so destructive because it's very linear. It's like whoever can produce the most of X
Yeah.
product, win. Like, what happens to those things once they're made? Like, let me give you an example. Like, I work in logistics. Like, I work in transport, so like loading trucks, freight, and mail.
Yes.
And then, for example, recently my partner, my girlfriend, she worked at a toy store, and it's like some of the stuff she sold at her shop came through my company that I work at. I even see some of the things that they would sell like being moved through the line, and like, this stuff gets manufactured, shipped over here, comes through my work. I send it on, it gets sold, and then someone buys it and they use it for like 5 minutes, and then it collects dust. And then like the company that made it order 1,000 more, and then it just does the whole thing. But like, we're not thinking about all the resources that go into making it, all the costs, all the operating costs getting it from one country to the other.
Yeah.
Most of that is, most the common denominator for the cost of living and cost of goods, whether it's food or consumer goods, is the cost of petrol. It determines pretty much the cost of everything in
Yes.
our day-to-day lives. Huge amount of petrol to do all of that, and sometimes it's like you're just doing it to buy a cheap thing that will break after 5 minutes, and then the
Seriously.
companies don't work with this is the thing about companies and capitalism. There's dodgy bilateralism, and companies are allowed to own huge amounts of land in countries, and they you know bribe politicians. The governments aren't keeping businesses accountable for their
No.
footprint they're having. For example, a huge amount of the raw material that Australia exports is not taxed. All of the main major oil companies in Australia, one of them only paid $30 tax on billions of dollars of profit, right? That's vast amounts of money leaving the country, leaving people's pockets that are going into the coffers of these businesses, for
Yeah.
example.
Mm.
It's all linear, it's one way. They're not thinking about reinvesting that money. They're not thinking about ways to recycle the goods that are not usable, recycle back into the sort of the pipeline. Oh, we got raw goods from the recycled stuff. We don't have to dig up more. We have to send TJ down the mines again. It's all, we pull it out of the ground. It ends up in someone's shed, and then it just keeps happening. And the money goes to the people running the show, saying that
Yeah.
we can make this. That's sort of my view on it. Is it's very linear. It doesn't care about what's below it.
Yeah.
It's like
Absolutely.
you break through someone's flower garden just behind you. You're not even paying attention to it, and they're
And
having
it's
to go and put
ugh.
stuff in, and then they just walk through it again later on.
Yeah, and it makes me want to
Sort of
drool
mind.
thinking about how like that process is pretty worldwide, Like
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter where you are now. Like even communist China does the same thing. If not, they do it even worse and they have an even more inefficient system. But they also never
I
like
mean,
really they are like probably the best as far as censorship, but not in a productive way. They're like we can't show the world any of the shit that's going on right now, because then they'll be like, ah, the Wuhan virus is coming back, woo, and like just all this other shit. It just like I love that this is like how this under the skin session is going. By the way, I like when
No.
we get all deep and shit like this, because these are relevant topics. Like even today, as I live and breathe, like the
Yeah.
problems are still relevant. They're going to be relevant probably way past my death or anybody I know's deaths, because there aren't enough people who give a shit, and even if they do, they don't have the financial means, the authority, or the power, socially speaking, to correct these mistakes. So I guess it will always be good for conversation. But that was autophagia. Now we move on to track 2, the wretched strive. My favorite track off of this EP, just because of like how active you guys were in the music video with your choreography.
Yeah.
I'm just like, this is a fucking vibe. Like this is exactly how people would be seeing this band live.
Yeah. That's one thing I think we tried to sort of get across in our video clips, is how, especially that clip, and especially for He Who Dwells in Grime years back, yeah, that was more or less like we want to sort of communicate what it's like the intensity of one of our live shows. And I think, yeah, across the board we did a pretty good job. We don't quite have the light show just yet, but we'll
Right.
get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, with regards to the Wretched Strive, like, can't even remember what the lyrics are about. I didn't write them, TJ did. But yeah, I think again, a lot of hatred, a lot of oh god, let me just look up the lyrics right now.
Right.
Sorry.
The way you have some
like-
material to go off of.
Yeah.
Just to sort of fill in briefly, like I feel like my interpretation of it was the Wretched Strive is a little bit further on, like, you know, say past our lives, you know, the world is starting to end. Because TJ's lyric where it says, I'm looking at a future world that no one loves, to me that's sort of a grim, you know, statement about what's to come, whether it's, you know, environmental catastrophe, you know, starvation, some kind of mass extinction event we bring upon ourselves.
Yeah.
Like I feel like he was in saying that, it's sort of like that's all you've got to look forward to is, you know, potential uninhabitable planet, and, you know, just, you know, if you're faced with that prospect, knowing that you can't live on, you know, you're not going to be able to live because humanity's devoured itself, you know, what you wouldn't exactly be having very rational thoughts, I imagine. I feel like the song conveys that right towards the end, just the panic and giving up.
Yeah, I think
Look
that's
forward to
yeah,
it.
more or less like musically. Okay, so musically, like, this was kind of weird because it was sort of like the first real experiment in that sort of like dissonant Gorgut style kind of death metal, like pulling that into sort of the deathcore or breakdowny sort of sound, whatever you want to call it. But like, yeah, we basically, it was just like, let's just use as many wrong notes as possible and see if it works.
I thought it was a bop, man.
Thanks. Yeah, like I think that was sort of the first sort of real experiment in going in that direction with regards to like riffs and, you know, arrangements and ambience and all that sort of stuff. And there's a little bit of black metal in there, like here and there. But yeah, more or less like pretty much exactly like David said, it's about, yeah, like everyone, I mean, obviously everyone cares about their own sort of weird set of things, but no one's really looking at the big picture of where the world's going. You know, everyone's sort of caught up in their own sort of little personal battles or like their, you know, activistic battles, and that's fine, whatever. Fight for whatever change you want. But
yes,
you know, that's not an excuse to lose sight of literally everything else that's happening. Absolutely no perspective, no consideration is given for, you know, humanity as a whole, or like it's more about these little pockets now. It's just this divide and conquer thing kind of gotten even worse, right? You know?
absolutely.
And, you know, yeah, like it's understandable. You can't expect people who are fighting for their lives to give a shit about everything, you know, like, but yeah, again.
But you would expect the people with the means and the money to do so, would do something more. And the amount that you see happening to them is pretty scant. You've got all for all the billion trillionaire philanthropists. I don't see mass migration crises slowing down. People not having to flee their country because they literally can't walk outside or they get shot or stepping on a landmine. People worried about what's going to happen to their kids. And like Australia as an example, like Australia in terms of like land size, about the size of the US, it's very different to America in terms of like the middle of the country is pretty dry. It's a desert.
Yeah.
But like one thing that I hate is Australia's adamant and very, very bad immigration policy. It's like we have thousands of people who flee on rickety ships from Middle East seeking asylum, and they think a good idea is to put them on a tiny little offshore island territory called Christmas Island and have detention, as opposed to bringing them to mainland where they're safe, where there's plenty of room. And the thing is, Australia is a rich country. Per capita, we're one of the wealthiest nations in the planet due to that natural resource export we have. So, like, it's just such a shame that the people in the positions of power to do something can't really just accept the fact that the world's not going to end because we open our doors a bit more to people who really need it. If people fleeing countries are like have any qualifications or life skills, I'm sure they'd be more than willing to share that, embrace any community, any country that would take them in, and they would, it would be a net positive at the end of the day. But people always think of they're going to take our jobs and all that sort of stuff. Like, they might need a job in the short term to survive, as we do.
Yes.
But if there's more people in the country, there's going to be more jobs to service everyone's needs, in my opinion. But like in the long run, you have to think of the long run. If there were more people who were able to live here, work a job, pay their taxes, that's going to do better for the country as a whole and improve everyone's lives, even if it's only a very small, barely noticeable amount. The fact that if you can consider it and be open to that, I think that's sort of what the bigger picture, looking at the bigger picture, means. Is not saying to your neighbor who might have immigrated, telling them you hate them because they're from a different country. It would go a long way to find out who these people are and try and be friends with them, or try to learn something from someone who's not from your part of the world.
Yes.
We're so very closed off. Funnily enough, quite often people misspell mispronounce xenobiotic as xenophobic, but it's somewhat relevant sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know. And people are like, what's your band called? It's xenophobic. I'm like, yes, it's xenobiotic. We're not xenophobes.
It's been a running joke for several years now. I think we got booked to play a festival like 8 years ago, and they announced us on Triple J, which is like the biggest radio station in the country, as xenophobic. And it's literally literally the exact opposite of what this band means.
Right.
Of what this band's name means. Yeah.
Jesus.
I don't know, man. People, awful. I don't know. It's a weird word. I get it. But like, that's not a PH. It's a BI.
It happened to me. Like, my autocorrect still doesn't know what I'm going to type. It still gives me that. To be honest.
That's so funny.
Yeah, this is I don't know. Maybe should have thought of that. I mean, I didn't think of that when naming the band, because I didn't think the name was going to mean much. But it's just this running joke, this running meme that's just whatever. People can't read.
We sort of forget about it, and it happens again. Just like, oh damn,
I forgot that was the thing. That's
it doesn't happen all the time.
Right, exactly.
Just chalk it up to general illiteracy at this point, I'd say.
Exactly, yeah. So as we're continuing to learn about this new EP that released earlier this year, that being Hate Monolith, we jump into track 3, which is Nether.
This is Nether.
What's going on with this one, boys?
So Nether was actually one of our older songs, probably one of the first, like it was actually a song off of our very first EP, or our very first sort of attempt at an EP, called Wraith. And this is sort of back when we were like, this was recorded in a shed and like my bedroom. So it was one of those like real home jobs. And yeah, more or less the lyrics are about, I guess, human overindulgence, human overconsumption, and I guess
Okay.
like this weird sort of push in culture to like overindulge and overconsume, more or less.
Okay.
And the fact that it's just kind of happening out of like a like a weird sort of drive, like a weird kind of depression that we're escaping from. It's very like, it's sort of like it's like we're addicted to consumption at this point in time. We're addicted to these sorts of baseline, very animal experiences, and like, a lot of
Things
people
like
are sort of
social
defining that. Hey,
They say things like social media, like YouTube, TikTok, these attention sapping, attention
Yep.
span wrecking kind of,
Yeah.
That is probably that's what comes to mind in terms of overindulgence. Too much TV,
Yeah.
so much video games. You've
Mhm.
got to have brain food in there as well. You've got to be reading, writing, and drawing, or playing music, or maybe if you're crafty, building stuff. Something that gets you to think critically, gets you to problem solve. You don't have to problem solve if you're sitting watching a video necessarily.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's like this weird sort of there's also this weird kind of aspect of culture where it's sort of like, it's sort of like there's a pretension of enlightenment, or like some kind of weird evolution in terms of like these ideologies like that kind of encourage you to just indulge yourself constantly, like like I think, like, I mean, I'm all for body positivity, but I feel like the way the body positivity movement kind of carries itself out, like the whole Nikocado avocado thing, that's probably the best example that I could think of. Like, I don't know if you know who he is, David. He's a YouTuber who basically like eats and eats and eats. Yeah.
It rings
Yeah.
a bell.
And hey?
Yeah, it rings a bell. I remember hearing about it. I didn't read into it or anything.
Yeah.
But I'm starting
it's pretty gross.
It's fucking awful.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. But at the same time, it's very much like, there's this weird kind of ideology that this is like liberating, or, this is very, evolved. We're not at the point where we need to abstain anymore. Abstinence is for Christians, whatever. Like a discipline is for Christians, discipline is for traditional, etc., etc., etc. No. It is literally
gotta take care of yourself.
a means of developing yourself, a means of sort of like divorcing who you are, your true self, from your base impulses. You need to get your dick sucked every 5 minutes or whatever. Whatever. I don't know. Like, whatever you're into, man. Like, there's a time and a place for it, and there's also the other stuff where you've kind of got to build yourself and practice your ability to sort of stay in control of yourself. Because I feel like the more you indulge yourself, the less control you have over yourself. And I think like one of the lyrics is like, masquerade as Dionysian liberation. And I mean, that was the whole thing with like, it's going back to the really, because we used to be like sort of a weirdly kind of weird Greek themed band. Sort of like how Nile had the Egyptian theme. Like, we tried to do that with Greece, but I'm not a historian. I'm not an Egyptologist. I'm not a Grecologist or whatever it is. Like, it was literally just like a pet, like an interest of mine that I wanted to sort of explore with this music, but it sort of didn't do that. But yeah, like there's, it's like this weird pursuit of like, of indulgence is kind of the message there. Is, I mean, there's not a whole lot of words. Not a whole lot of words in that song, but I mean, it's more or less about, that kind of weird sort of push in culture now where we just kind of got to be indulging ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
It's animalistic. It reduces us to basic animals. It enslaves us to these sorts of needs. It's like, that's more or less what I'm getting at. It's like the song ends with like the line, "We were born to scrape the barrel is the lowest form of life." I was really, really, really disillusioned with humanity at that point, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's more or less what's going on there.
Sick. Well, I mean, that's track 3, and that's more or less just like kind of being, like you said, cynical and like, I don't even know. I mean, it's a pretty realistic concept, especially when over here in the United States, a lot of people enjoy the idea of being gluttons, and that's just my own opinion. That's all I'm gonna say. But let's see. Track 4 would be Pathos. What do we got going on here?
Okay, Pathos is like an old song, very much like the first sort of foray into what you would call tech death for this band, I guess, because like there was, I mean, you know, there was one riff where I'm sort of really pushing the sort of the limits of technicality and sort of experimenting with kind of the weird, almost like Meshuggah style sort of rhythms kind of stuff
Okay.
that was kind of going on there, and it's very like. It's really we don't play this one live because it's a little slow. Like it's very much like a sit back and listen kind of song. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like you can't really go off live to it. It's weird. But yeah, lyrically it just seems to be more or less wrapping up what's happening in the rest of the EP. Yeah, at this point, I think TJ was just kind of like, I fucking hate the species. I fucking hate this stupid species, you know? And I think that's more or less what he was writing it from. It was just, yeah, I think there's some really, really cool lines in here, like born into extinction by our own existence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, it's very much like at this point, what is left is not very good and it needs to turn itself around or it will not be around for very much longer, I guess, or it will be replaced with something else, or I don't know, man. I feel like at this point in time, human culture is at a very, very, very dire point where we need to start turning ourselves around
Yes.
right now, and like we need to sort of start looking at our habits and saying, "Hang on a second, what are the humans we want to be like? What is this?" And that's really difficult because a lot of people just don't see what they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I feel like that's what more or less what this song is about. Well, this song is more really despondent. It's like, yeah, well, no, we're not going to get there. We're fucked. We're done. It's just a countdown now. We're just kind of
Acceptance.
twiddling our thumbs and waiting for, yeah, waiting for the rapture. I guess I don't know what you want to
Right.
call it.
Kind of accepting the pathos, haha, ahead.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
works
See,
pretty well.
pathos means as Greek again for suffering.
Right.
Yeah. So like it's more or less kind of in that vein of like, yeah, it's literally like I guess this is more or less the pathos of humanity, Like yeah.
Pathos, I would say it's like the pathos sitting and watching it unfold almost.
Mm.
It's
Just like you might as well
where-
sit down and have a little cigarette and just like,
Yeah.
all right,
Just
the world's
watch the
about to
world
end.
burn.
Yeah, just watch the world burn. No, I like that.
Put pathos on in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at these lyrics now, and he's written like, "Into the abyss, there's no return. Join me in a world that's choking on itself." So yeah, no one can help us now.
No
Don't
one can
speak.
help us
Don't
now.
breathe. Yeah.
Yeah,
No one can
sick.
help us now. It's like, yeah, off we go.
Off we go to never coming back from this land. Woo!
Yeah, off we
That's
go to
great.
hell.
Off we go to hell, yeah. So with the final track of this wonderful, smashing, annihilating, curb stomping death metal EP from you guys, that being Xenobiotic, we have Sever the Ties. which I think is a
Okay.
great way to wrap it up.
Okay, so Sever the Ties is actually a cover of
Oh.
TJ's very first band, which is one of my favorite Perth bands from way back in the day. We wanted to do something from one of our sort of local bands that, you know, didn't really quite see the light of day outside of Perth.
Right.
But like, yeah, so we, you know, this is very much like, it was very much in that sort of style of metalcore, deathcore, where you remember where you just kind of write lyrics about, like, you know, your girlfriends or your ex-girlfriends, and like so I'm not
Sever the ties.
yeah, well, more or less, yeah. Yeah, like I'm pretty sure that's what it's about, like a lot of relationships going sour and stuff. Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's like I don't think it's explicitly about a woman or a relationship or anything like that. It's just um yeah. I think there is, yeah, I can't, I honestly can't say anything about this song. I didn't write it. I didn't write any of the lyrics.
Right.
Like this, I mean, it was just a song that I really fucking loved from this band, I'm Eternal. And yeah, just wanted to like kind of give it its day. But for some reason, it wasn't marketed as a cover. So nobody actually knows that it's a cover. So yeah, that's coming up for the first time on this podcast. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. There you go. Exclusive
So-
to the Anime podcast. This is a cover. Like,
Yeah, it's a cover of a band that, you know, and I mean, this is something, I mean, I guess the reason I wanted to do it to cover a local band, and I really sort of pushed for this sort of to happen because it's like there was this weird wave of like local metal bands in Perth, especially covering pop music, pop tunes to get sort of like clout, I guess you could say, on the internet.
right.
And it worked a solid thing for a lot of bands, and you know, there was a lot of interesting music that came out of it. But I mean, it was still just metal goes pop, and I just kind of hated that. You know, I hate it. It seemed like a cleave. You know, may I have a crumb of attention, please? That sort of thing. Like, and I mean, that's fair enough when you're starting out and you want people to sort of pay attention. I get that, trust me. But I wanted to go in the absolute opposite direction. I wanted to sort of like, you know, like I wanted to say, hang on a second, there is some great metal in our backyards that, yeah, has been completely overlooked, you know, and we wanted to, and I mean, this song is like, what, when we covered it like last year, so like 2021. So yeah, it would have been like 10 years old back then.
Oh,
you know?
shit.
Yeah. So this is like a real like OG. This is also one for like people who followed us from way back when we were a bunch of dumb kids. Like, yeah.
Gotta stay humble, I guess,
This is
right?
sort of, there was like a huge scene of like riff based, you know, deathcore, metalcore, whatever you want to call it. Like these guys were a melodic death metal band, and they were very much like they were probably the most illustrious band, and literally half of that band ended up playing for Xeno. We have their vocalist still. Yeah, our ex drummer and ex guitarist were both in that band as well and wrote this song. And like as soon as they left, it was just kind of like, yeah, you know what, let's do this. Like let's do this. And I mean, TJ was keen. TJ wanted to do a different song, but like yeah, I feel like we made the right call, especially, and we had Mikey come to sort of like, you know, recompose the drum parts on this. So yeah, it was good. It was really good.
Yeah, and I think that's among other things. Like, of course, I can simply say that's a great way to wrap up an EP, but also, like, speaking on behalf of all of the brotherhood, the community that we've been talking about before, this is a great way to kind of confirm and set that in stone. Like, you're willing to go back in time and pluck music that your friends, your current bandmates were writing back in the day, and give it the benefit of the doubt, give it the limelight. I think that's really, really cool. And I think that because of that, easily one of my favorite, like, kind of ways to end a record. And I have every intention, because of this session, and, you know, just because I've been writing music since, like, what is it, like 2014, 15? So it's been a long time. I've been writing a lot of music. So I have every intention to, like, bring songs back from, like, previous band projects that never even fucking had full lineups, never played music, just like basically a logo and lyrics, you know. I have every intention to do that now because of, like, hearing stuff like this, because, like, that shit's important. It's important to like recognize legacy, to look back and to give spotlight to what could easily be just a forgotten project, a void project. David,
Yeah.
did you have any commentary to offer regarding Sever the Ties?
Like before the production of the EP got underway, I wasn't too familiar with like the band I Am Eternal, or that Half a Xeno were in it, because like I'm on the other side of the country, and I think actually I Am Eternal, if they did get any sort of recognition across Australia, it was probably just a bit before my time, actually, before I was sort of paying attention to metal in Australia. I was probably still in my Dream Theater phase and all that shit.
Yeah.
What I will say, it was a solid. I think it was a solid choice of track to cover. Playing, stylistically, it's a little bit different. It's a bit of a faster song. Just offered sort of like a nice, riffy conclusion. Like I can only really speak for the music part of it,
Yes.
because I just recorded the bass on the EP. But yeah, I still genuinely like the song. I still listen back to it from time to time, and it's actually cool to sort of hear it with the new production and the old production, and
Right.
like I definitely think that in and of itself attributes a lot to what kind of style you'll put it as, because like I definitely feel like it sounds like a death metal song on the EP. If you go back and listen to the original on YouTube, what's the name of the album or EP, Nish, it's off of? Do you remember?
Conflictions, which is not actually a word. Conflictions, it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, it's up on YouTube still, I think, so you can still listen to the original song as it was
Yeah. I know it's on Spotify
recorded.
still, and it's still got less than like
Oh, it
1,000
is. Yeah,
streams.
yeah, it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
but like,
it's really weird. There's such an like probably the most underrated band in the history of Perth. But like, yeah, because I mean, honestly, their live show. I mean, you've seen. I mean, their live shows are basically our live shows now. So, because it was just that's just what TJ was like back then, and it was just it was awesome, man. It was so like they were like I honestly thought they were going to be the next band that blew up. Sort of like I mean, obviously it was Make Them Suffer, but like I figured that they was the next, but like
Fantastic.
that's where it was at.
Cool. And I think that's a great way to wrap up the Under the Skin session. Shout out to future me for taking the time to fucking go and like I cannot
Yeah,
imagine
Future
that's gonna be
Sean. Yeah.
fun. But